What's up, guys? Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host, Caleb. If you guys want to support the channel, you can click on that whatnot link in the description down below. You'll get a free $15 whenever you sign up, and you'll be supporting the channel whenever you do that. Additionally, you can become a patron. Not only is that the best way to support the channel, but you'll get to vote weekly on a deck tech that I cover. Special shout out to my high contributing patrons. Newsom, you rock. Now, let's get into today's deck tech with Nadu. And guys, this is the most powerful Simic commander we've gotten since Kinnan. Do I think it's more powerful? Not really, but it is extremely powerful and probably second place in all of Simic, so definitely something to look out for, especially when bringing it to a casual pod. But we've got a disgusting deck list here today, so let's get into it. Now, the first thing that people miss about Nadu is that its ability actually works for every creature. It's a Lord effect that gives that ability to all your creatures. So now whenever we play something like a Lightning Greaves that has a free equip cost, we can just equip it to every single creature on our board, triggering Nadu each time, and a Nadu trigger is going to reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, you shove it into play, notably not untapped, and then if it's a non-land, you put it into your hand. So whenever a creature becomes a target of a spell or ability, you just go ahead and draw a card, and if it's a land, you put it into play. Pretty busted, especially again when we're on all of the free equipment. So all we have to do is generate a massive board state and just get insane value. I did put Scute Swarm in this deck. Probably not okay, but we're going to do it anyway, because what's going to happen is we're going to move the Lightning Greaves to the Scute Swarm. We're going to put a land into play, getting us more Scutes, and that gets us more triggers, right? So it kind of gets to a point after you get 6 lands where you can just draw your entire deck and play your entire deck. We have the same interaction with Displacer Kitten in this deck. Again, these are 2 cards on the watch list for maybe not okay. They're probably just not okay, but they're in here. And now, so every time we cast a sorcery spell or instant spell or anything non-creature really, we blink our commander, and that's going to reset all of the abilities. So as long as we're able to put more lands into play to cast the spells in our hand, again, it kind of makes a scenario where we put our entire deck into play. Not okay. And after that, we did go with a little bit of a more funny strategy. We're playing Ivy Gleeful Spell Thief, and we're just trying to make as many Ivy copies as possible. We're on Vesuvian Diplomacy. We have Ovar, the All Form. Just a lot of ways to create token copies of Ivy. We do need a non-legendary copy of her, but that's not going to be very hard in Simic, since they're printing something that makes non-legendary copies every other day. And then additionally, as I stated before, we're on all of the free boots. It's also just packed with a bunch of interaction that protects our board state, because a lot of the green spells that protect our board give it hexproof, indestructible, right? So every time we cast hexproof on our commander, it'll also give all of our Ivies hexproof. So again, there's a lot of protection just jammed into this deck as well. So if that sounds like a deck tech you want to get into, let's get into it. The first thing we need to ensure is that we can get every single trigger off of all of our creatures every single turn using our commander. Equipment that are free to equip is the easiest way to do this by far. So Lightning Greaves, Shuko, Umbral Mantle, all very good cards here. I'm also on Paradise Mantle and Swiftfoot Boots just for some added protection, and 1 mana to do it is still very efficient, especially with Paradise Mantle, right? As long as they aren't summoning sick, we can go ahead and equip Paradise Mantle, tap them for mana, and that'll give us the mana to equip it to our next creature. So it's essentially free for every creature that doesn't have summoning sickness. I want to cover Scute Swarm and Displacer Kitten real quick. Now, these 2 cards will win you the game if you have one of these free equipment on the battlefield, your commander, and a decent board state. Because what's going to happen here is, as long as we have 6 lands with Scute Swarm, every time we trigger our commander and put another land into play, we do the whole Scute doubling thing, right? So you'll kind of get more lands into play before you run out of Scute Swarms to equip to, kind of resulting in you drawing your entire library. Displacer Kitten does something very similar, but you need a little bit of a better board state for this, because what's going to happen is every time you cast one of those very cheap instant or sorcery spells we're running in this deck, we're going to blink our commander, and that's going to reset the abilities of all of our creatures on the board. So as long as you're getting enough mana to cast another instant or sorcery spell From our commander triggers, you're able to again cast your entire library and kind of put all of your lands into play. Notably, Finale of Devastation is going to be our win con of choice whenever we pull this combo off, because it gives all of our creatures haste as long as we shove at least 10 mana into this. Moving on to the next strategy of the deck, I went ahead and included a lot of creatures that wanted to be targeted, like Gargos Vicious Watcher. This is going to be very good. We're on a lot of instant and sorcery spells that target our creatures because, again, Ivy is kind of the secret commander of this deck. Willbreaker is kind of messed up. Instead of targeting our creatures, we're going to target our opponent's creatures, and it's just going to turn all of those very cheap target spells into just flat steal spells, which is kind of messed up. Ovar the All Form, now whenever we target one of our very broken creatures, we get a token copy of it. Ivy Gleeful Spell Thief, again, this is kind of the secret commander of the deck, and then we're on several ways to make non-legendary tokens of Ivy, that way we can have more than one, right? That way, whenever we cast something like a Gold Rush, we get a copy for every Ivy we control, and it kind of turns into a ritual. Silver Fur Partisan is also a very good way to generate a massive board state, that way we can trigger our commander more times with our equipment. Vesuvian Diplomacy is a very good way to copy our Ivy and even our Orvar, right? The more token copies we can create of these creatures, the more triggers we're going to get, and it's just going to lead to an insane board state that generates insane value. Irenicus's Vile Duplication, Quantum Misalignment, all very good cards to copy Ivy. And then we have Echoing Equation. This can kind of create an insane turn where we either turn all of our creatures into our commander that allows us to kind of draw our entire deck, or we turn all of our creatures into Ivy. Now, I would do the Ivy option if we're trying to end the game, and then if we're trying to just generate an insane amount of value, we're going to go ahead and copy the commander. Once we get Ivy on the battlefield, we definitely want to protect her, right? So we're running a lot of instant spells that just give our creatures indestructible, hexproof, or even just flat out phase them out. This is going to ensure that Ivy is protected, and we're going to trigger our commander while we're protecting her. Contest of Claws is also super funny in this deck. We're going to copy it equal to the amount of Ivies we have on the battlefield, right? And then it's just going to deal a ton of access damage. We're going to get to explore a ton, and then hopefully get a lot of value off of this while getting rid of our opponent's creatures. Same with Feral Encounter, right? We're going to get rid of some of our opponent's very impactful creatures, and then we're going to get to dig super deep for our key creatures at the same time. Notably, that exile is a May effect, so we don't have to exile every creature every time this resolves. We can just kind of find our key pieces and then cast them. Prize Fight, Gold Rush, a solid way to generate a ton of treasure tokens, again equal to the amount of Ivies we have on the battlefield, while also getting rid of some of our opponent's creatures or just buffing our creatures up. What's kind of crazy is with the right amount of Ivies on the battlefield, Gold Rush can just be a flat game ender, since that does give the creature +2/+2 for each treasure token you control. Scale the Heights, just solid card draw, then you get to put a land into play, you get to gain 2 life. Again, all of these cards are amazing with Ivy out, so think of them kind of in that context. Trash the Town is super solid here. We get counters and we get some solid card advantage. Inscriptions of Abundance. Now with a kicker spell, you're going to copy each effect that you chose when you kicked it whenever you copy it. So as long as we pay the kicker cost, we get to put 2 counters on each creature, we get to gain that life, and then we get to fight creatures we don't control. Verdant Confluence works exactly the same way. Every option we choose whenever we cast the original is going to get copied by the copy of the spell that triggers on Ivy. 3 Steps Ahead is another solid way to get more copies of Ivy. Now notably, this only works with non-legendary copies of her, but there are a lot of ways to do that in this deck, and then it's just flexible. We get to draw cards, and we can even counter spells with this. Archdruid's Charm, again, this is going to copy whatever option you choose, so we're ever going to get to copy this with Ivy, where we put a counter on Ivy and then it deals damage equal to its power to another target creature. Notably, we can use this card to just find Ivy in a pinch, and it is also solid removal. Legolas's Quick Reflections, this one's really cool as well, because not only can we protect Ivy, but we can even use this in a very offensive way too. We can go ahead and use it, and now every time we attack with any of our Ivies, we get to deal damage to a creature. Very useful. Season of Growth is just going to draw us a card whenever one of our spells copies a creature we control. Eternal Witness is just really good whenever we have Displacer Kitten on the battlefield, so now we can get our ritual effects like Prize Fight or even Gold Rush back for from the graveyard whenever we cast a spell, and that's just going to net us more mana to keep going off. Sylvan Paradise and Sea King's Blessing can target every creature on the board, and it's just going to trigger our commander very consistently. After that, we're just running a ton of low to the ground creatures. I'm talking mana dorks, we have some protection creatures, just anything that's very low CMC and comes out onto the battlefield early. That way, it's very easy to get this strategy going. This deck does nothing if we don't have any creatures on the battlefield, so our mana dorks are just going to be very useful here to not only get our game plan going in the early game, but then in the late game, it's just going to be more triggers for our commander. In closing, this deck's just not okay, and I think it's going to be pretty powerful. Hey, if you guys want to see another deck that's also pretty powerful, you can check out this Azlask Lisk. Now, the goal of this is a little bit different. We're going to use treasure tokens, reanimate those treasure tokens, and then sacrifice them to trigger Azlask's ability. That will net us a ton of experience counters, and this deck can just do some crazy things with that. So if you want to check that out, I'll leave the link on screen. As always, I would like to shout out my patrons, Newsome, Excessum, Chicken Salad, and Praetor. You guys are awesome. I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you guys in the next one.